going on, guys? I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World and the Black Business School. And I get the distinct honor and pleasure of bringing in and addressing a respected colleague who works with the Fly Nubian Media Network, Miss Jade Arrindell. And before I even begin to say another word, I'd like to ask Jade, how you doing today, sister?
I'm blessed. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, really well. I hope I'm as blessed as you. And, we're about to hit on a real interesting topic. Right now, this whole abortion conversation is kind of taking over the airwaves for the most part, at least when it comes to mainstream media, whatever bit that we happen to see. Alabama, just last night, if I'm not mistaken, signed one of the most restrictive anti-abortion laws in the history of this country. The conservatives seem to be rallied up to try to challenge Roe versus Wade. And of course, we know that the liberals and the feminists, are going to go, bananas. Their heads are exploding. I assume you read some of this, and what are your initial thoughts as you kind of seen all this unfold?
Yeah. So again, well, first of all, thank you for having me on today, because this is a really important topic, and I think that it's important that we discuss it from the perspective of Black women, and also getting perspectives out there like mine that are not so mainstream. I am not a liberal. I do not identify as a progressive, and I definitely do not identify as a feminist at all. I am a Black woman. I'm an African womanist. I'm an unapologetically Black Pan-Africanist as well. And, I abide by a specific code of conduct when it comes on to culture and also spirituality. That is very, very African-centered. So that's the first thing I must say. I did see that the most restrictive abortion ban has been put out and signed into law by women and also a lot of white men, surprise, surprise, in the state of Alabama. So I'm looking at it from multiple perspectives. The first thing I would say is, what's the motivation, what's the reasoning for the state of Alabama and for a lot of white conservatives to go so hard when it comes on to women's rights? The way I'm seeing it, clearly there's a lot of data that's coming out of the Brookings Institute, as well as other places, that shows depopulation within white and European communities, right? So white folks are not producing children at a quick rate, right? Like they're actually flying like under the radar when it comes to fertility and reproduction. So that's one thing that I will say. Also, to add on to that point, we have to be really, really clear in terms of what racism and white supremacy is all about. White supremacy is about fear of genetic annihilation. The white man's and white women's fear of genetic annihilation. Our ancestor, the late, great Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, taught us that, right? And Dr. Nellie Fuller talks about that, and a lot of our scholars talk about that. Despite what's put out there in the liberal world, like by these progressives, when it comes on to anti-racism work, they call it critical race theory, and they always bind that with gender studies. That's a whole nother conversation. But the narrative around race or racism is really, really watered down, and it's still coming from those who are benefiting from whiteness and white supremacy and white privilege. But now that we know from an African-centered perspective by our scholars, our psychologists, our scientists, is that white supremacy and those behaviors and institutions that they created is born out of a fear of white genetic annihilation. Then it only makes sense that if white folks are not producing at the same rates of other people, of other non-white people, especially African Black people on the planet, then white men will go extra hard to make sure that they're doing any and everything that they can to force white women to have babies. To force white women to have babies. And we know that these white conservatives also do not openly endorse homosexuality or the LGBT community. So they're seeing a lot of they're counting all of those things as lostness, to my estimation, right? And I do this work and working in anti-racism. They're counting white women who are not procreating with white men. They're counting white women who are choosing not to have children. And there's a lot of fertility issues also within that are documented historically within the white race. these white folks, these white men, they're trying to do any and everything that they can to make sure that white women are producing, because they are clearly in fear of genetic annihilation. So I wanted to be clear about that. So I can see from that perspective why the state of Alabama, a very, very, very conservative state, would choose to sign something like that into legislation for the benefit of Europeans, what they think is going to benefit them and help them like procreate. Now, in terms of like from an African-centered perspective, or from a perspective as for myself personally as a Black woman, I have my spiritual beliefs and my values, and abortion personally for me does not fall in alignment with those. So if women want to go out here and get abortions, and for different reasons, I mean, you know, there's incest, there's rape, there's molestation, there's trauma, and then women, a lot of Black women especially, choose not to have abortion. I mean, choose not to have children, and do choose abortion. So if women want to have the right to choose, they get to have a right to choose. That would never be my choice. And also because I know politically and socially the history of abortion and how it's been used as a weapon of mass destruction and genocide and eugenics onto the Black community to make sure that we are not reproducing, right? The founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, was a huge racist, a huge eugenicist. There's data here. She wanted minority, you know, Black populations, so-called minority, I put that in quotes because I don't refer to myself or us as minorities, just want to be very, very clear about that. But she saw non-white people as a threat, right? Like she was such a eugenicist in American eugenics and how it was used onto the Black community in terms of birth control and also abortion was so successful that eugenicists in Europe and Nazi Germany studied those methodologies and applied them over there within that Holocaust, within that whole movement. And so as a socially conscious African woman who is African-centered, it's really, really difficult for me to have any passion or interest or motivation to put on a cape and go out and cape for abortion rights. Personally, that's just me. I'm not trying to take away the right for any woman to have an abortion. If they choose to do that, they need to do that. But it's just my hope that Black women are really, really clear about the role that eugenics has historically played in abortions in our community, low birth rates. Also, sterilization is an issue. You know, African women are being sterilized without their consent. You know, we have East African migrants to places like Israel who are being systemically euthanized. I mean, not euthanized or, you know, made to be like infertile without their consent.
Well, you know,
there's a whole agenda there.
Well, what I'll say on that, by the way, I'm talking to Jade Arrindell, and we're talking about the recent changes in the abortion laws and what's been going on in Alabama. In case you guys don't know, Alabama just passed some really restrictive abortion laws. So did Georgia. Other states are following, or they either are following or have followed, like Mississippi, etc. And what's interesting about this, Jade, everybody hit the thumbs up button, by the way. If you haven't done it, please hit the thumbs up button. And welcome Jade to the platform. You know, Jade, I think that it's interesting that when you talk about issues like this, what I see missing is, in line with what you're saying, is that what's missing is us having the Black conversation about,
yes.
You know, I don't think that it's like, whether you talk about anything, abortion, gay rights, all of that stuff, you know, every community is affected by all these factors, and we're all sort of part of this mix. But what tends to happen is that white people have a conversation and then they tell us what to think. You know, they tell us like, oh, this is what we all decided on our own, you know, about LGBT stuff, and we want you all to go in lockstep with that. And if you don't, then we're going to make fun of you and call you bigots and, you know, and punish you for, you know, allegedly discriminating, right? You know, whereas I do think the Black community has always needed and has always had some sort of gay conversation. For example, you get a lot of men that go off to, a lot of our men go to prison and things happen in prison. And there's a whole conversation about that issue. Some of our children, you know, are affected by it, et cetera. And I think that conversation has to be different than the one that white people have, because we're not them. You know, like we don't have the same history, we don't have the same culture. We have a different kind of soul. You know, I think just as a community, we're just different. So I think that when you're talking about abortion, you know, I was trying to figure out how I feel about the abortion topic. I was asking people, I was reading stuff, I was trying to understand how, you know, as a man, I could have an opinion about abortion without it being something that is unfairly oppressive, you know, on the rights, woman's right to choose. And a couple of things came to mind that, you know, that hit me. One was what you said about Margaret Sanger. We know that abortion, it's proven, it's documented pretty clearly that Margaret Sanger wanted to use Planned Parenthood and all that as a weapon of mass destruction. I saw it, you know, y'all think y'all see it here in the United States. Y'all should have been with me in South Africa last year. Have you been to South Africa, Jade, by chance? Have you ever been to South Africa? You have? Did you go to maybe like Johannesburg, the inner city, and see how many abortion advertisements there are, free abortion ads, and only in the black neighborhoods? I went to the areas where the white people live. I didn't see one advertisement for an abortion. I went to the hood. I saw free abortion, free abortion, free abortion, free abortion, free abortion, like everywhere. And I said, oh my God, like you had to be from another country to see it and to be shocked by it. I think the people there were it was just normal for them. But I said, okay, they're trying to exterminate black people here. You know, so that's one of the things that kind of gets to me. Like, you know, yeah, you can have a conversation about abortion and a woman's right to choose. And I think that we all, at least it sounds like, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe a woman has a right to choose. I had to think about it. Am I pro-choice or pro-life? I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-choice. Meaning, like, I want you to have the right to choose, but I want you to choose wisely. And what annoys me about some of these white women, the crazy feminists, the real extreme ones, is they talk about abortion as if it's like getting your tooth pulled. You know, like, oh, well, you got another semester in school. Go ahead and kill the baby. Who needs a little motherfucker? He ain't shit. You know, and that offends me personally. Let me tell you why I'm personally offended by that. When I was born, my mama was 17 years old. And my daddy had already left. My daddy left my mama when he found out she was pregnant because he was 15. We were dirt poor. I was born in the projects. And my mother has confessed to me. She said, if they had an abortion clinic down the street and made it real easy to get an abortion, I would have probably done it. If I'd had the money, I would have done it. And she said, and I'm so happy that it wasn't easy and that they didn't pressure me too much because I thank God for the fact that you're here, right? And so I just think that, you know, it's almost like the right to choose is fine, but I think that we should think about how we make that choice. And also the other thing I'll say, and then I'd like for you to get your take on all of this, is, you know, I don't think it should just be the woman's choice. You know, if I'm a man and my seed is in you, and that's my child too, stop acting like it's 100% women's decision. No, it wasn't 100% decision to make that baby. Without me, you know, or without the male seed, you can't get pregnant. So, you know, this idea that as a man, you have no right whatsoever to have any say in whether your child lives or dies, that almost says to me that some people are so busy fighting for their own rights that they're taking away the rights of other people. You're oppressing other people. So you're fighting oppression by becoming an oppressor. And I just think that's bullshit. Go ahead, Jay. What would you like to say to any of that?
Well, I have a lot of things to say. One thing that I will say is that the main thing that our oppression in the West for these last 464 or 500 years has done to us is had us take on the mindset and the paradigms and the cultural norms of our open enemies and oppressors. And we have accepted and adapted white cultural norms and paradigms as our own, and we forgot that we had our own, right? And so in all things African, there's a balance between masculine energy and feminine energy, right? So this idea of rugged individualism, independence, I can do what I want, I'm my own individual, is a very, very, very Eurocentric concept. Meaning that as Black people, as African people, we are naturally, spiritually, under the belief that we belong to the community, we belong to our families, right? And so everything that we do is supposed to be of benefit to the community as a whole, and especially to our families. And so you're not acting on your own volition. We don't act on our own volition. And so to your point of, when it comes to the abortion issue, like, should it be a man's, just a woman's choice, or should it be a man's choice as well? I think that this popular narrative around abortion being, it's just my body, my rights, it's just a woman's choice. I think that it's completely Eurocentric, and I'm not sure that it serves us as African people.
Everybody who's watching, I am speaking with Jade Arrindell from FlyNubianQueenTV.com, and we're talking about the recent changes in the abortion law and what's been going on in Washington. Everybody who's watching, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done this yet, please hit the thumbs up button, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And also make sure, if you'd like a free e-copy of my book, It Takes a Village to Raise the Bar, go to drboycewatkins.net. That's drboycewatkins.net. And also Jade's social media. What is your social media, Jade? Where can people follow you, by the way? I want to make sure people know that now before I forget.
Sure, yeah. You can follow me on FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. Also on Instagram, I'm Lioness Crowned. That's Lioness Crowned with an ED on Instagram. And then I'm Jade Arrindell on Facebook.
All right, Lioness Crowned and Jade Arrindell on Facebook as well. Follow Jade. Jade is super smart and she's super passionate. And that's one of the things I respect the most about her. So, one thing I'll say, Jade, is, when you talk about the abortion conversation, I think that it becomes one of those weird things where it almost makes me think about the legalization of drugs. I tend to be a person that believes, in individual liberty to a point, but I also believe in personal responsibility and the responsibility to your community, et cetera, right? So I'm the kind of person that, if you were to ask me, like if a liberal were to come up and say, should drugs be legalized? I say, oh, sure, why not? People getting killed over dope. I don't know if the government has a right to tell people what to do. The government's wrong half the damn time. So fine, let people do what they want to do. But the thing is, at the same time, I would want there to be some sort of, not so much regulation, but at least some sort of ethical persuasion to help people make 100% sure that if you go take this drug, you know what you're getting into, right? And in fact, you're discouraged from taking this drug because we know what this drug can do to you long term, right? So that I don't know if that's more of a conservative ideal or what. Like I hear the liberals kind of using weird terminology that people should just do whatever they want and have no accountability whatsoever. Like when Amber Rose has that conversation about slut shaming. Like you can just go sleep with whoever you want and nobody has a right to judge you for that. And I'm like, no, but people are going to judge you, like, because you run around acting like a crazy hoe. Like people are going to talk about that, right? It's not to say they're going to hate you for it, but they're not going to treat you like the person who had more discipline in terms of what they did with their body, right? And so when I think about the abortion thing, I think what kind of just really has always bothered me is that it seems that on the liberal side of things, when the abortion conversation takes place, it almost takes place with a lot of reckless disregard. Like aborting a baby is just not a big deal, and that just never sat right with my soul. I one time, to have a moment of confession. One time, I had a young lady I mentored who asked me to give her a ride to the abortion clinic. Now she was grown; she was over 18, but she didn't want her mama to know, so she asked me to give her a ride to the abortion clinic, and I did. And I felt so spooked just by the fact that I gave her a ride. I felt it laid on my spirit because she had other kids, and I'm very visual. So like when you tell me you're pregnant, I see a person. I don't see like a bunch of whatever the feminists call it, like they say it's a bunch of cells in your body or what. No, I see a person. I see a person who's going to go to kindergarten and eventually middle school and high school and college and get married and have children and have a lineage of her own or his own. You know what I mean? Like I'm seeing the next 80 years. And I remember I felt so guilty just from giving her a ride to the abortion clinic. I said, I ain't never doing this ever again, because this does not spiritually feel correct. And I think that's the thing. I think that I get really irritated when they fight every little regulation that people want to put in place, like little things like, just talking to you about what the options are, or letting you kind of know like really what it is, like not pretending like it's not a big deal, or showing you some images or video, not graphic, but just stuff to kind of just really let you know like the pros and the cons of the decision you're about to make. I don't feel like they do enough of that. But then again, maybe I'm wrong because I've never been a woman. I've never gotten an abortion. What do you think? I mean, do you think that they go a little bit too far to the extreme to talk about abortions as if it's only a matter of the woman being happy, the woman's body, the woman's convenience? But I remember thinking like, what about the child? I saw somebody complain about the law and they said, well, they just showed us that women don't matter at all. And my thought was, well, maybe they're showing us that children matter. Maybe I mean, again, I don't know. Like, tell me what you think. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a lot. I think feminism itself and liberalism are extreme. I think that anything that promotes anything that is anti-life is the antithesis of what we need to be focusing on as Black African people. I do think that there are a lot of circumstances created under the system of racism and white supremacy that makes it difficult for Black families to stay together. That makes it difficult for women who are single parents and or men who are single parents to feel like they have enough familial support in order to raise a child healthily. That could encourage them to make that decision. But I do see like a complete disregard for life and spirit also when it comes onto the abortion conversation. It's about the conversation quickly turns into a conversation about money and economics and finance, resources, and other tangible things that are inanimate, right? That are like not about life or giving life or spirit or spirituality at all. And so I think that a lot of times those talking points are used by the far left and by a lot of feminists who, people who are pro-lifers. So I definitely have made that observation. I do agree. And I think that that's all outside of our paradigm as African people, and also like being in my art, which is like balance and harmony with not only ourselves and each other, but with nature and the universe. So we're speaking completely different languages, or, when it comes to our value systems. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of our people don't have access to this information. People don't even know that white supremacy is about fear of white man's fear and women's fear of genetic annihilation on the planet, and coming from a scarcity mindset. When you are in a scarcity mindset, the more people that there are, even if it's your own people, according to the European, even if it's more of them, they're seeing resources as them being scarce. So now they need less people, or they have to fight or be contentious in order to survive. That's the mentality of which, from which white supremacy and racism was born. And so it's no surprise that when confronted or interacting with other melanated peoples on the planet, that same mindset of scarcity is projected onto us, while we have a mindset of abundance. The more the merrier. I have sunshine and resources and crops and everything in order to survive, so we don't have to kill each other necessarily, have that mindset in order to survive. And so I draw those correlations when I hear some of these mainstream media talking points, especially coming out of the far left, and a lot of toxic feminists with toxic femininity that is anti-life. It is still a scarcity conversation, and it's also a gender war between, as far as I'm concerned, the white male, who is the representative, the only and the true representative of patriarchy. That's what patriarchy is for. But now I hear that word patriarchy and toxic masculinity being projected onto our brothers. I mean, and if our brothers are, in my opinion, enacting behaviors of patriarchy, what could be deemed patriarchy, that is also a manifestation of their oppression. Their oppression of living under a system of racism and white supremacy. So let's not point fingers and like take the blame off of the true culprits here, right? So I think I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I'm trying to extrapolate that which is natural for us in terms of values and ways of thinking and ways of being, and what has been projected onto us throughout years, hundreds of years of racial oppression and subjugation. We have to start there. We have to make sure that our children at least have that information. We get to educate ourselves and make some real shifts and be able to pinpoint the history of what we're seeing manifest today. What's the history behind abortion rights? What's the history behind the feminist movement? What does patriarchy mean? What is racism and white supremacy really all about? You know what I'm saying? So we have a long ways to go, but I think that the thing that hurts me the most is when I see so many of our people, our beautiful melanated African people, Black people, who have internalized racism and white supremacy to the max, in which they think that there's no alternative ways of thinking, ways of being, or ways of doing things, and that whiteness and what's coming out of Eurocentric culture is the norm.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what I think about Jade too is, when you talk about, one of the interesting things about white people that I find fascinating is that they kind of, when you're in the role of the oppressor, you can become a bit of a narcissist, and you don't realize, like the elephant is walking and he's not thinking about like if he's stepping on any other animals on the way, because he's so big and everyone's catering to him, and I think that the white woman has collectively, they're kind of the ultimate narcissist, because the whole world's kind of catered around protecting, preserving, and supporting the white woman. Like, the white woman is the only one pretty much that can, accuse a man of rape when he didn't even touch her, and the man can still go to prison and there's no evidence that he touched her or anything, like the Albert Wilson case, things like that, which is very scary, for a Black man. But it's funny when you think about that narcissism. What that kind of does is it causes them sometimes to take their worldview and impose it on us. So they'll look at their relationship with the white male and they'll say, oh, he's oppressing me. He's not letting me do this. He's not letting me do that. And then they'll, have a Black woman next to them, their soul sister, some white Black girl that went to Brown University and now calls herself a feminist. And they will tell her, like, yeah, these men, they oppress you. And look at your men. Look at what Black men are doing to you. We hate our men because they oppress us with their power. Well, your men do the same thing to you. And then it's almost like she's got this weird, almost the same. And the men get it too. The men get their own version of this infection, this psychological infection. And you bring it home to your family and it poisons the whole environment. Right? Because as Black men, I don't think the collective of Black men see themselves in a position to oppress, the way a white man can. We don't own the corporations and all this other stuff. Now, Black male behavior can be challenged. There are some things that, again, things that we picked up from them, right? Because they control the media, right? They marketed these messages to us. There are some things that have to be confronted, but for the most part, when that Black woman comes in, she's like, you're oppressing me, and I'm gonna just do this and do that and yell at you and blah 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 and berate you because I think that you're an oppressor. We're just kind of like, what? Like, what did I do? And so it's kind of weird. And then the other thing that's fascinating is that when they have the conversation about abortions, here's where abortion logic from the white feminists naturally leads to Black extermination. One of the things you mentioned earlier, you said that money is usually a factor that's mentioned when people explain why someone should get an abortion. Like if you ask a lot of white feminists, like, okay, if a woman is poor and can't afford to take care of another child, should she terminate her pregnancy? And a lot of them would say yes, because if you can't afford the child, you can't give the child a good life, and because the child needs money in order to be happy, blah blah blah. Right? Now I challenge that because I grew up poor, and I didn't know I was poor. I didn't give a shit. I was glad to be alive. Like, I don't know if any of y'all grew up poor, but a lot of us grew up poor, right? And it's fine. You live in the hood, you eat those mayonnaise sandwiches or whatever the hell you gotta do, and it's fine. Like we're together. My parents didn't, they stayed married. It was all of us together. And that was all we needed. That was what we needed more than anything else. We didn't need more money as much as we needed the love that was in that house. I wouldn't have traded that love in the house for all the money in the world. Okay. And so, but if you convince Black women and Black people for that matter, that not having a certain amount of money means you should get an abortion, well, Black people don't have as much money as white people do. You know, our likelihood of being poor is much higher than it is for white people. So if you just simply use that as a measuring stick of whether you should be encouraged to abort or not, that's going to lead to more Black babies being aborted than white babies. That's really a type of systematic racism where you take this factor that you think is unconnected to race. Like, no, it's not about the color of your skin. It's about your income level. Well, shit, income level is about the color of your skin in America, right? They're connected. They're like brother and fucking sister. Excuse my French. So if you say everybody below a certain income level should have their children exterminated, then you're going to be exterminating Black babies left and right, right? And so I, again, that goes back to that point I wanted to make, and I'll let you get the last word. I believe whatever choice people make, they have the right to make that choice. I don't even want this to be a pro-choice, pro-life type of dialogue, even though I think both of us are pro-choice, but both of us are also pro-life, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. You spoke all day about life, but you also in the beginning said you believe in a woman's right to choose, which I think is a part of the conversation that isn't heard enough, right? And everybody has their right to make their own decision, but I think at the end of the day, Black people have to insist among ourselves that on any important issue, any important social issue, we're going to have our own conversation with each other and come to our own conclusions, independent of what somebody else is telling us to think. What are your thoughts? And I'll let you get the last word.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that last statement. I will also add on to that and say that like when you study the differences between that which is Afrocentric or African-centered and European-centered, Europeans place the highest value on objects and the acquisition of objects, right? Which is the tangible things. Black people, African people, what we traditionally value as the highest, like the most valuable thing in life is relationships between people, which is why it could be okay. It used to be okay back in the day when we weren't bombarded with all of these liberal talking points. It's okay. It's like, okay, well, people are poor. People may not have the most things. I think you spoke about like your upbringing personally, but it wasn't far-fetched for people to have children and raise their own children, because life and like relationships and family was far more valuable than money, or like worth the struggle to a certain degree to have your family, to be with your children and to keep your family together. So I wanted to put that out there. There was another question that you asked me that I want to make sure I get the final word on. So repeat that point for me one more time, please.
Oh gosh, I don't remember all the questions, but I do know. I know the main point I wanted to make was that Black people have to have our own conversation about things with abortion. Also, I do believe that the systematic that abortion policy and abortion ideology as it exists in America leads to both the intentional and unintentional extermination of Black children. I do believe that deeply. The data is just too strong, and I also believe that whatever is happening here in terms of the extermination of Black babies, it's magnified tenfold in parts of Africa. Again, when I went to South Africa and I saw all those advertisements for abortion, I did not feel comfortable with it. That did not gel with my spirit. But that's all I remember that I said. So
yeah, for sure. We have a lot of work to do. And we need to be having conversations that are exclusive Black conversations, where there are no Europeans or any allies or so-called allies or any other groups present. And these conversations need to happen in our families. We need to evaluate what our values are. We need to evaluate how we got our values, whatever they may be. For each person or each family, that's going to look differently. And to really see if like these are things that we're choosing for ourselves or things that we're being socially whipped into submission to accept, which is also a manifestation of, being a prisoner of war. So we definitely need to have conversations about values. And I think that we need to have a paradigm shift a complete paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is going to come from us learning our true history, and being able to unapologetically stand in our truth, speak our truth, and to defend our culture and our values, regardless of any potential threats, gaslighting, etc., 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 from other folks. We have to be able to choose who we are and to define ourselves. Unfortunately, the masses of our people in the States, in the Caribbean, South America, you know, the world, the diaspora throughout, are still allowing our values and our values and our culture to be defined in reaction to white supremacy, in reaction to white cultural norms, out of fear of deviating from that which they really do deem normal. So we just have a lot of work to do. We have to reevaluate the relationship between the Black man and the Black woman. We have to have conversations about gender in our households and as Black people, without any influences from anyone else's values. We need to talk about sexuality. We do need to talk about abortion, life. We need to talk about adoption, foster care, everything like that. Like, we have to really start from the ground up and define these things for ourselves. Right now, what I'm seeing is that we're just basically accepting and going along with what white folks are telling us to do. And until we stand in our own truth and define ourselves, we're going to continue to be treated as children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know what? I will say that not everybody's falling for the okie doke. And so thank God we have people like you that are helping us to define ourselves and to learn who we are. When I was talking to Dr. Claude Anderson today on this very channel, that's one of the things that was one of the topic he picked for today. He said, you know, we don't know who we are, you know, and I think it's very important for us to figure out who we are, because if you kind of know who you are, it's hard for other people to tell you that you're somebody else. You know, you're going to say, no, that's not who I am. I'm this person over here. So everybody who's watching, when you have those children, make sure that you tell them who they are early. Get them before somebody else grabs them, before some, you know, TV. So for some TV show tells him that he's a thug, or the school teacher convinces him that he's the class clown, or somebody tells him he's supposed to be a basketball player or whatever, right? You tell him who he is so that he won't have to wonder who he is and walk around looking for love in all the wrong places. And that's what, you know, I think, you know, when I think about a person who knows who they are versus somebody who doesn't, you know, it's almost like the difference between a rock and a leaf. You know, when the wind blows, the leaf flies whatever direction the wind's blowing. You know, and those are these random opinions from white folks or whoever, right? And that's what you see when you see Black people that don't know who they are and they're looking for acceptance and validation. They kind of shift and they become whatever somebody tells them to be. You know, just like in The Eyes, like that scene in The Eyes when the Eyes kept saying the color now is green. They all started wearing green, and he said the color, I wouldn't be called dead in red. The color's red, and they're all wearing red. That's what a lot of us end up doing because we don't know who we are. I mean, think about it though. It starts in the beginning. You were going to this school run by white folks, watching, you know, media run by white people. Now you work for a white person, so you've never had any sovereignty in your life. You've never been able to look at anything, a piece of property even, and say this is mine, this is ours. A school and say this is mine, this is ours. A media outlet and say this is mine, this is ours. Right? Everything that you've done, you've been a borrower and a renter and a visitor. You've never been an owner of anything. Right. And there's something about owning something, starting with owning yourself, that leads you to dig your feet in a little bit deeper and to just kind of say, no, I'm good. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm supposed to be because this is home for me. And the home isn't just a physical place. Home is also psychological. So everybody figure out what it means to be at home and stay at home and don't let anybody blow you off your spot. Be the rock. Don't be the leaf. Because we got too many leafy motherfuckers out here. These leafy Negroes on TV, you know, just going with it wherever they tell them to talk about. That's what they start talking about. And I don't want to be that person. And I know you're not that person. So thank you, Jade.
No, I don't know.
Thank you so much for being who you are. And give me your social media again. So everybody who's watching, please tell me you're gonna go follow Jade. She's really dope. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Jade.
Thank you. Look for me on flynubianqueen.com. That's on our Facebook page. I'll go live from there. Also, I am Lioness Crowned on Instagram, and I am Jade Arrindell on Facebook.
All right. All right. So that's Jade Arrindell, everybody. Make sure you go follow her on social media. Hit the thumbs up button before you go. Please share, subscribe, all that stuff. If you want to support the growth of intelligent Black media, please sign up at intelligentblackmedia.com. That's intelligentblackmedia.com. If you become a patron, that little tiny amount that you're investing in building the platform goes a long way to helping us get things done. So we would love your patronage and your support. Also, if you live in Philadelphia, I'll be there on May 19th, Malcolm's birthday, and I'm going to do an all-day investment seminar. If you want to go to the seminar and you live in Philly, go to drboycephiladelphia.com. That's drboycephiladelphia.com. Put in the word Philly if you want to get 50% off. And also, and I'll show you this, Jade, I don't know if you saw, my book is coming out on that same day. It's Black American Money 3. So that's me.
Awesome.
Looking fly on the cover. Actually, I got these young guys that I think I kind of mentor them a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm the OG, but I told them, I said, I dress like a nerd, so I need y'all to make me fly. Like, give me some cool fashion. So they actually picked this jacket out. Jay Ortiz did, actually out of Philly. Jay Ortiz and Peter Parker. Okay. And so anyway, I'm really proud of. I'm really happy. This is the third installment of the Black American Money series. I started it back in 2004. That book comes out May 19th. So feel free to go check it out. drboycebooks.com. That's where you can find my books, Dr. Claude Anderson's books, a lot of great books. So drboycebooks.com. So thank you, Jay, very much. Have a good night. And see you guys soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.